then a subclass would be fieldable, in a way? Or particular entities would be fieldable?
Probably. I think field module does run a lot of crap, even if you don't actually have any fields attached, maybe.
It does a lot of what?
There's a base overhead, whether or not any fields are attached to it?
I think there is, yeah. Yeah, it's certainly something. Yeah, because you call the field attachments, like...
Right, so I mean, some entities shouldn't talk to the fields API at all, and other entities...
Do we want to be that specific, or do we just want to say, there's lightweight entities and full entities, and fieldable can be one of the different...
I have a question. How does this pair to your problem with attaching the entities to the users themselves? I mean, can we run these queries in two different modes, where we do attach and don't attach them, so we can still have the lightweight entity itself?
Yeah. So
you know what I mean? Without running...
When you run this API, you pretty much, I have an entity here. This is almost what Ceph does. And I look at it, I look at the entity info, entity metadata.
Sure.
And if it has fields, then I talk to the field API. There comes the overhead. If it doesn't have fields, then I don't talk to the field API. The distinction between a fieldable and a non-fieldable entity probably doesn't need to be too harsh. It is even possible, if we want, that is sort of the entity metadata. The entity itself carries a flag whether I have fields or I don't have fields.
I suppose what I was actually reaching to was, instead of having, we talked about not wanting to select subsets of data on these fields because we want to load the entire node or whatever the attached entities are to it. But perhaps a binary decision whether or not we want to load the base entity or the fieldable entity might be one distinction in which we could load these things in two different methods.
So you have a light load and a full load?
You have a light load and a full load, much like we have, like a teaser and a full load. You know what I mean? It's kind of the same kind of binary thing where you only have two options, and we can begin to attach these entities to all of these objects without the overhead.
Runtime as well. You pass in
as an alternative read method, basically, as a lightweight read method.
Yeah,
and that gets rid of your problem with attaching the fields to the users where they actually do belong-ish. You know what I mean? You can make an argument that way at least.
Yes.
But I totally understand what you're talking about with the
right. But
overhead.
once you start differentiating those, yeah, I mean that's hard then, because then it messes with your ability to cache.
Well, no, you just have two caches.
Which is like global user and then the user that you get from user node, and it's, I don't know.
I'm sorry, one more time.
At the moment, you have global user, which is built from like a session.
Yeah.
And then you have the user that you get when you call user node, and those are two different objects. And I think in 7 we actually duplicate some queries as well, like roles maybe gets called in session and then it gets called again. So it's like it's very easy to end up doing double work once you do that, because you do the lightweight one, but then some other module over here does the full one on the same page, and then you just lost all the benefit of doing the light load in the first place.
Well, so is there any way to do a quick load of, when you're going to do the full load, to check if the partial load of the existing object is already cached, you could just pull that out of the cache, right? And then continue to load on that object, assuming it's a fully populated base node, or base object, you know what I mean?
Like the standard setup of is that you have no cache on the base entity, but then the fields are cached.
Yeah.
But then all this stuff like from the node mode or anything else, that's not cached either. And then like the instant cache contrib module just caches everything that it possibly can at the end of the node. So you could make a distinction, but I don't know. I think what I would prefer is that the fields are very complex, so they're actually references to other entities.
Sure.
So you have a reference field, and then you don't load a reference field. You never load the entity when you load the object.
Right.
And that comes in separately when you need it, and do it that way. So that but then the only other issue then is if you have like huge text fields, which is kind of crappy, but you don't need it.
I have run into that before. Not a Google site, but I had 100K worth of text that was part of one record across a couple of different fields. Just trying to load the edit page for the thing sometimes crashed the database. I should have a terrible database.
That was something I was going to bring up, which I forgot about. If you have certainly things like there are some fields that you want to make queries on, that you don't want to ever really load. So you add a field that does business logic somehow that keeps the data and feels a nice easy way to add that. But you really don't want to
do we have
fields?
Do we have certain fields that then are flagged as lazy only?
As attributes. This is what swing search does. If you have used swing search, swing search does this. That with swings what you have is that you give a select statement to swings, It then runs that query for every ID as we have discussed, and you mark some of the things that you have selected as attributes. Now you can run your usual queries and sorts on the attributes, and then the rest things treats as text, and you can text search. You can only text search those, but you cannot sort on those, and so on. We can do something similar. We can say that, you know, these are the attribute fields. These are what I want when I do a so-called lightweight load, and these are the heavyweight fields. These, if I want them, I will count for them separately. This will save a lot of space in caching as well.
What if everybody just registered ahead of time what they're interested in?
Sorry?
What if everybody registered ahead of time what they're interested in?
No, because that, I mean, it kills your caching again, right?
Yeah.
Because your every potential call.
See, I'm thinking, what if you combine those, and then an entity consists of properties of some kind, which is very primitive stuff, and then fields, and you are not allowed to put data on it otherwise. An individual field instance then can be marked either load and cache or lazy load on first request. That way, gigantic text fields do not get pulled in until you actually request them. That also works for things like, the value of this field will depend on the time of day or the current user viewing it and stuff like that. That solves that same case. Whereas everything else, by default, you load all of that up front, you cache that, and you just pull it in the cache.
Another way to think about it, though, is, I mean, what you were just suggesting, that basically everything you have is references. I mean, there's no reason that the text field itself has to be stored with the node, right? You could have a text entity, right? And you load the node. What?
That just scares me. I don't know if we want to push the rabbit hole quite.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm saying no, right? I mean, but it's like the node needs references to, to all the data it contains. It has very little, intrinsic data, and a lot of times, yeah, you're manipulating the node. You don't need to know anything about its body text.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that approach has the value of being much simpler, because that way you automatically get that you have your field identity, you cache your field identity, and automatically those huge things are not loaded because they are only reframes.
But there are also entities that are cached, so when you do need them, you can still pull them out.
Right, and then you can pull them out quickly because you have their ID, right?
But we have this different field types, and you can make your own field types. And if you have some super long piece of text, you can make a special field type for it that does nothing on load and so forth. So I don't know.
You can do this for 7 already. You are right. The question is just whether we want to bake this into the base or not. And Moshe is right that probably we can punt on that.
Yeah. What? I don't need.
Yeah. No, I think
we're going to wrap up in about 13 minutes. Okay. And then we'll go back, do 2 more sessions, then we'll do lunch.
Awesome.
So that's the question. Would we rather? I do think this is something that should be figured out before we write anything. Do we want large text field that I'm not going to want every time, and dynamic data that is uncacheable? Should that be a field that is marked either in code or in config as lazy load, or should that be you have to have a text field reference field that points off to that instead? I kind of lean towards the first, just for simplicity.
I think that makes it harder, right? Because anything that's that lazy load. Well, there isn't really any difference, right?
Extra.
What's the
There's
difference?
The API you use to get to it. I'm assuming that if you have a reference from a node to a node, you have some kind of dereference operation to load that other node and get it. And then that's going to be an entity that has fields on it. If what you're loading instead is a text entity of some kind, then you have like this text wrapping entity which has a field on it that is text, but then you can't access it as if it were text. But when you are accessing that data from the first node, you have to know that it is going to lazy load.
Well, no, it's not a problem. You take your node, and let's say you need the body, which is a rare operation. Then, as you said, there is a dereference operation. You say, I need this body, dereference the body. It loads
But if I have a text field on my node.